Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, people of the world. I'm your host, Mo. Today, we'll be starting a sub-series on the podcast called the Transpacific Dialogue, posted every fourth Saturday of the month. This sub-series will focus on questions about the Philippines and the United States, asked by both Filipinos and Americans. A regular guest on this series would be my good friend Miguel, who asks questions on the differences of Philippine and American society. Today, we'll be taking a long look at the relationship that is complicated and long between the Philippines and the United States. He will be the one driving the conversation while I'll do my best to answer his queries. Without further ado, let's begin. So, what do you got for me, Miguel?
Well, ang unang question ko is my first question. My bad, no. I forgot. We'll have some English viewers. All right. So my first question is, how and when did this this complicated relationship start, bro? I'm just curious.
Well, the thing with the relationship of the Philippines and the Americans actually dates back even before the Philippine-American War and their intervention in our conflict with Spain. The thing is, Filipinos were actually on American soil, like even before colonies were set up by England in what we know today as the east coast of the U.S. Like, for example, the Spanish brought Filipinos to Texas and Louisiana to scout out the areas. And some Filipinos actually set up settlements in New Orleans, and some stayed in Texas. Some of them even explored up the coast from California to reach Alaska with the Spanish. And the Philippines already has like a long history with the United States already, even before both entities were even formally created, since the Filipinos were already on American soil long before the Americans ever touched their own soil. And this prolonged history actually is cool, since like Texas used to be called the New Philippines. Like it's not even a joke. Like
What?
Texas was officially named the New Philippines by the Mexican viceroyalty government back then, before being officially changed to Texas y Coahuilas. But yeah, moving on to like proper diplomatic relations, like in terms of wait, give me a sec.
Take your time, bro. But it's really surprising na the fact that the Philippines has been into America even before the Americans existed, or did the Americans already exist? Or yung
No.
the country?
Wow. The Filipinos were in America like in the 1500s, like after the Spanish already conquered Luzon. They started bringing Filipinos to Mexico to help out with labor and stuff, servitude.
Okay.
And basically, they predate the Puritans of America. So yeah. Now,
Wala
like
pa
I was
ba yung
saying,
mga colonies dun sa So the 13 colonies didn't exist yet, or did they exist na? Did the 13 colonies exist already?
No.
Oh, okay.
Was in 1600s. So
Oh my God.
no.
I think your audio is dying, bro.
Bruh. Wait. I'm gonna disconnect my phone from the Wi-Fi. Give me a sec.
I.
All right. So, my apologies for that short technical difficulty. Anyway, so concerning the diplomatic relationship of like the Philippines and the United States, like back then, I guess it started after, obviously after the U.S. gained independence, because Spain actually did help out in the American Revolution by stealing Florida from Britain. And by extension, the Filipinos were in contact with the Americans by then, because we're part of the Spanish government. Even though we don't really have representation in the Spanish courts, we do have records of contact. And skipping forward to the juicier parts of it, let's go to the 1800s. So the Spanish Empire obviously fell apart during the Napoleonic Wars, and the Philippines was really in a precarious position on whether they should declare independence or not, since most of the Spanish colonies in North and South America already declared independence from Spain. So what authority do they have, right? And the U.S. was actually really supportive of these independence movements. It's just that they never really got to liberate Cuba or Puerto Rico or the Philippines. So those three became the only last standing Spanish colonies left here. And after a few hundred years, the U.S. decided that manifest destiny was a thing. So they tried expanding, and eventually there's this incident in Cuba where the Spanish are like already at war with like insurgents, both in Cuba and in the Philippines. And then suddenly an American ship blows up on the harbor, and they're like, let's blame the USS Maine on Spain. So they went to war with Spain over that. And that's how the Americans actually ended up like becoming interested in the Philippines. Like their most Western-ish position in the world was Hawaii, which they acquired at the same time as the Philippines. Since the Hawaiians were already subjugated under the US and all that. And well, of course, they want a gateway into Asia for strategic reasons. So they got the Philippines. And during the war with the Spanish, actually interesting, since the Spanish just got blown out of Manila, man. Like the Americans just rolled up in there with big boats, and they blew up the entire Spanish Pacific Armada in Manila Bay. Just like that, they were sitting ducks. And after that, the troops disembarked and fought with the Filipinos against the Spanish until the Treaty of Paris, which, you know, famously gave the U.S. the Philippines for $20 million.
Now,
so, I mean, at the time, that's a huge sum. Like, I'm not sure what's the inflation figure at, but I'm pretty sure it was more than $1 billion by today. And, well, yeah, we were bought basically. And obviously this started like a huge disconnect between Filipino and American relations, since obviously we wanted independence already after Bonifacio and Aguinaldo fought stuff.
Yeah,
and
true.
The thing is though, there were collaborators within the Filipino government working with the United States during the war.
Okay.
I'm gonna be real. My one of my ancestors, Pedro Paterno, was actually one of those collaborators with the Americans.
Ooh, look at you, dude. All right.
Anyway, other than that, so the war happened because of a misunderstanding on a crossroad. American says halt, Filipino doesn't understand. Shootout happens, war. And as the war progressed, like the Americans were actually dying more from disease than bullets. Think about that for a sec.
True. You guys narinig ko, diba? It says that during the Philippine-American War, was it expensive to wage war against the Philippines, or?
Well, no. The Americans could afford to send troops over here and stuff like that, since, I mean, you got a very solid link from stretching from California to Hawaii to Guam to the Philippines. So resupply stations everywhere. They can definitely do that. It's just that it's costly in terms of medical care, since the Americans don't know how to cure malaria, for one. And, you know, other tropical diseases were here in the Philippines that the Americans simply have never encountered before, which is why, like, at the end of the day, they lost like 300,000 men, most of them due to malaria and other tropical diseases.
It's AOE, area of effect damage. It's not normal attack.
Yeah. Meanwhile, like I think in terms of like bullet casualties, we've only were able to eliminate like 100,000 Americans back then, and yeah, that's pretty telling about our ratio of kills.
bro, why are we so bad, man?
In comparison, the Americans were able to kill like 1 million Filipinos at the most liberal estimate. Yeah, 1 million. So, whoop-de-doo.
Why do I have such a shit KDA?
I don't know, dude. But anyway, so after that,
Yeah.
after the war, the Philippine leaders were captured by the Americans. Obviously, Aguinaldo was kind of canceled, ish. Not really,
I mean, he
but
was really canceled, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, the Americans got him under arrest and stuff like that, and then Mabini was actually exiled to Hong Kong or Guam. I think I don't remember, but he was exiled from the Philippines because the Americans saw him as a dangerous revolutionary,
the
even though
man had no legs.
the man had no legs.
They banning this guy. Oh, what did he have? I forgot. I know meron siya. He had the.
He got the brain.
Oh yeah,
He got the
he
brain.
did. He
But
got the brain, but he got no legs though.
I mean, he can't fight the war himself, but his ideas definitely are dangerous to American occupation. Definitely.
Well, what were
So they exiled him.
What were Mabini's ideas?
I'm not entirely sure how to quantify them, but after Rizal's death, he was very persuasive in galvanizing Filipinos to fight for the government and stuff like that. And he was actually like the man, the brains behind like the Aguinaldo administration, since he was the one writing all the presidential decrees, stuff like that. He's the prime minister of the Philippines at the time. Yes, we did have a prime minister alongside President Aguinaldo. So it was like a dual system kind of thing.
Was it like a Commonwealth? Long time now.
No, no. The Commonwealth is more like a presidential system that we see in the United States. And
okay.
back then, it's pretty hard to say like how power was distributed because, well, obviously it was too short-lived. There wasn't really any official documents that dictated how the Philippine government should work at the time, since it only existed during wartime. They didn't have time to reorganize for civilian peacetime governance. Now, anyway, moving on.
Okay.
So the Americans were able to subdue the Philippines, and the war actually didn't end until 1913, despite the war officially being declared over by 1901. The reason why it went on until 1913 was because Mindanao proved to be particularly tenacious. Like, they couldn't be subdued. Not even the Spanish could subdue them enough back then. So the Americans had to do a prolonged guerrilla campaign against the Moros and the other ethnic groups in the Philippines in the South at the time. What's interesting about this war was that it actually made it necessary for the Americans to develop new weapons, because the Moros actually had berserkers, right? So they
the
took,
one that was cracked out, diba?
yeah,
I
the
know
ones
that.
that took copious amounts of opium and cocaine, and they basically charged the Americans. The revolvers couldn't do anything against them. Like an entire cartridge of revolver shots went right into a single berserker, and he'd still keep going. So this is actually why the M1911 pistol was born, because of the Moros.
Because a 38 special can't handle a fucking Moro, a freaking Moro.
This is why we needed a 45 ACP.
Yeah. To gun down. All right.
Anyway,
okay.
So imagine that though, like the Philippine-American War, for all intents and purposes, only ended just before it began.
Damn.
It's crazy. And the thing is, though, for the rest of the Philippines that already surrendered in 1901, the Americans were already setting up like schools, administrations, introducing Protestantism, stuff like that, basically Americanizing the region. And in that time, the Filipinos actually have a mixed relationship with the U.S. A lot of them started liking the U.S., a lot of them didn't. But it's quite telling that by World War I, that during the war, 117,000 Filipinos willingly signed up for the U.S. Army to join in the fight against Germany in the First World War.
I don't know this. Yo, what? Did they get to see any fighting, or did they just join the army?
We had
Just
one war hero from World War One. I forgot his
no.
name, but he's got a memorial in Manila somewhere. He fought in France and was unfortunately shelled by German artillery.
Rip, 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 rip.
Anyway, yeah. So after that, we get to the Commonwealth, right? The
Yeah.
Commonwealth government was established in 1933 since the Philippine Governor General was actually lobbying for the Philippines to open a path towards independence. And it was promised that by 1942, should the Commonwealth run things smoothly, that the Philippines would be granted independence. But of course, 1941, the Japanese came, yada, yada, yada. You know the rest.
Yeah, yeah. Invade. Fun.
Fun. So,
Yes.
what's the second question?
The second question is, it's still the same, but what happened after World War II? What happened directly after World War II?
After
Oh,
World War
World War
II?
II. The Philippine-American War. My bad. My bad. I
All right, all
forgot
right.
my.
So, like I said, the Americans were setting up schools, missionaries, and all that stuff that basically transformed the Philippines into a more Americanized region. See, and in
Imperialism.
that,
I'm just joking. I'm just joking.
well,
I'm
in
sorry.
some sense, it was really. In some sense, it really was. But the thing is, though, most people don't really explore this period of Philippine history because uh, people just generally assume that the Americans were there, and that's just that. Like the Philippines
Yeah.
just gradually industrialized and stuff. But the thing is, in the United States, the reaction to acquiring the Philippines was actually very mixed. Like a lot of people
Oh.
were like, "Bro, we are such hypocrites for doing this. Why are we doing this?" And like they're saying like we broke away from Britain specifically because they were too imperialistic and they were imposing tyranny on our people by taxing us for wars that we didn't fight. And now that we're doing the same thing to the Philippines, it's like why bother, right? Since it's just so antithetical to the Declaration of Independence of the United States, wherein it does inscribe that liberty, freedom, justice for all, and the rights of all men are equal. So why treat the Philippines as lesser? That's the argument of the American anti-imperialist movement at the time. Meanwhile,
Mm.
those who are pro-imperialism have said that this is a service to the Philippines because, um, at the time, the whole idea was that. Are you familiar with the term "white man's burden"?
No, I did
So
not know this.
basically, um, during the scramble for Africa, the Europeans came up with the whole rationale of colonizing Africa for the sake of civilizing, for lack
Oh,
of a better term.
white guy sweat, no? Alright.
Yes, civilizing. Now, the Americans also ended up adopting this because, European immigration into the United States was really big at the time. And
Oh.
there was also a lot of support from war hawk factions in the US government for this particular movement. So, yeah, and at the end of the day, they won because William McKinley was one of those war hawks and he was president of the United States. So,
Damn.
uh,
Oh.
after that, um, what is interesting is that this American politician called William Jennings Bryan was actually a staunch opposition leader. And he's actually one of the lesser known, but also somewhat famous American politicians at the time. Like he's a senator, I think. I forgot. but but yeah, Jennings Bryan was like, yeah, this is really hypocritical of us. Why are we doing this? And after World War One, the Americans started focusing on the Philippines more. And Woodrow Wilson, wee. But uh,
But
before World War One, though, like Theodore Roosevelt and William Howard Taft, two other presidents of the U.S., actually tried to give the Filipinos a better deal since Roosevelt actually fought in the war against Spain. So he kind of
mm,
understands what it's like to see oppression by Spanish hands. So he's trying to liberalize the Philippine economy. Meanwhile, Taft was the one who was pushing for self-governance in the Philippines. He was the one who basically created new, how do I say it, infrastructure programs, stuff like that. And he actually commissioned, are you familiar with Burnham?
Burnham. Like I heard his name before, but I don't remember anything other than that.
Actually, forgot his first name. Wait, look it up. Daniel Burnham. Yeah, right. So Daniel Burnham is quite known for, Burnham Park in Baguio. Yeah. And the thing is, Burnham was actually an urban designer. And he was the one who basically made the grid for Manila as we know it today.
Oh, wow. That's cool. All right.
He's obviously, his design obviously didn't age well, if we're looking at Manila.
Wow.
I mean, to be fair, it wasn't exactly his fault because, like, later on down the line, as you go east in Manila, you'd see that the design really does stray away from what he intended. And then we end up with messy cities like Quezon City and Mandaluyong and stuff like that. Whereas Manila is really full of grids and stuff like that. And he also designed Baguio, which is why the park was named after him.
Oh.
And he's actually like also the designer of the cities of Chicago, St. Louis, and a bunch of other places in the US. He's got an impressive track record. He even designed San Francisco, for crying out loud.
But he failed here. I mean, he didn't fail. Like, again, it's straight.
He didn't fail here. It's just that no one bothered following his design in Manila, particularly in Manila.
What? No one bothered? What? Like, they just said, yeah, screw it.
Because, like, after he died, like, the Filipinos decided, they're not gonna enforce it anyway, so let's just build the thing our own way. And yeah, that's how Metro Manila was born.
Yay. Ingenuity. Let's go. All right.
So after that, integration, right? And a bit more education into the English language, stuff like that. The Americans actually brought good literacy rates here in the Philippines because the Spanish didn't really have that good of a school system, whereas the Americans actually educated like both sexes. And at the end of the day, like, there were so many new schools popping up here in the Philippines. It's just that the old guard of the Spanish universities like Santo Tomas, Ateneo de Manila, De La Salle, and yeah, those places.
Okay.
they're still very strong. It's just that you now have places like the University of the Philippines, which was established under the American occupation.
Oh, that's pretty neat.
I mean, the UP was actually made in 1908, like 7 years after the surrender of the Philippines. Americans brought their scholars with them and set up the university and helped out Philippine academia flourish at the time.
Wow.
And after that, how do I say this? It's really more of a push towards self-governance, since the American people didn't really want to stay for too long in the Philippines because they really felt like they didn't belong there. It's just that the government decided, we're going to try anyway. And to an extent, development in the Philippines was definitely a lot faster than it was under the Spanish. Like by 1898, you already see Spain like already a highly urbanized city with a good roads, with good tram systems, trainways. Whereas here in the Philippines, like, you're lucky to find a railroad, and the roads aren't exactly paved, stuff like that. Manila is the only city worth mentioning at the time. The rest of the place was just Bahay Kubo, mud hut, stuff like that. And Spanish architecture didn't really have much of an impact. Then the Americans came with their urban planning, which was fresh from developing in New York, in San Francisco, Chicago, and they built a megalopolis in Manila out of that. It wasn't that big by the time they left, but it definitely was something. And the economy in the Philippines actually drastically improved. Like, for example, by the 1920s, we already had cars here, whereas in the 1890s, like, only the richest of the rich could afford a carriage. Here in the Philippines, we already had cars, paved roads, and better housing. Actually, like you
Wow.
see the houses in Baguio, like the
Yep.
really
Yep.
old ones.
Yep.
They were built in the early 1910s. I would know
Wow.
because, like, my ancestral house in Baguio was built in the 1920s, and it's still standing with minimal renovations.
Wow. That's that's pretty cool. That's pretty neat. Yeah, damn. Oh, okay.
Also,
Okay.
the reason
So,
why Baguio exists was because the
mhm.
Americans decided, hey, this is a lot like California. Let's set up shop here.
Oh, is it no? Is Baguio like a lot like California?
Well, Northern California, since the mountains and the trees, the pine forests are what really brought it home, along with the temperature. I'm pretty sure that's why they
Oh.
settled there, because it's the closest thing you'll get to the Philippines to actually being in America.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, I get you.
And they developed the place, and yeah, it's basically what it is now. Like the what they're calling the White House in Baguio. I forgot the
Mm-hmm.
actual name. That was built by the Americans for the Governor General of the Philippines, and then later on the President of the Philippines to reside in, stuff like that. And
Okay.
as time passed by, like the Governor General of the Philippines, as appointed by the United States government, started receiving less and less power since it was being diverted more and more into local leaders in the Philippines. So Manuel Quezon, hell yeah, he came along.
Yeah. Yeah. Could you tell me that one line he said that I find it very
Which one?
funny. You know,
Is
I'd
it the
rather
governance one?
yeah, I'd rather be governed
Oh,
by Filipinos.
he'd rather the Philippines be run like hell by Filipinos than run like heaven by the Americans.
Well, we certainly seeing
I
that
mean,
words
I
today.
mean, for the sake of avoiding too much controversy, I'm not gonna comment on it just yet
That's all right.
because, e, e.
E-
Anyway, so what's the next
I
question?
well, I basically you answered my third question is why didn't America keep the Philippines as a new state and why did it give us independence? So ito na lang.
Ah, well,
Okay, go ahead.
why did the Americans didn't? Why did the Americans not keep the Philippines as a new state?
Yeah.
It's more complicated than just the public perception of the Americans regarding the Philippines. It's also due to the fact that state eligibility criteria just really wouldn't apply to the Philippines. Like, you can divide the Philippines any way you want, but the fact of the matter is that the Filipino people would be outnumbering every single ethnic American that there is, like ethnic group in America. I mean, like,
Oh.
um, imagine a country of 110 million people, our size, suddenly joining a country of 330 million. We'd immediately make up one fourth of the United States' population. We'd have overrepresentation already. And we aren't exactly sure which way the Philippines would vote, so that would massively destabilize the US government.
Oh,
Since,
that's true. That's true.
and other than that, well, also, there's also the fact that the Philippines was not Americanized enough by the end of the 1940s. Plus, there were really a lot of lobbyists like saying that the Philippines better be independent. Now, the interesting question is why didn't they stay for longer to help rebuild the Philippines after World War II?
Uh
Since 1945, the Philippines was a wreck after 3 years of Japanese occupation and continuous American bombing to, kill the Japanese. Um,
yeah.
Manila actually ended up being the second most destroyed city in the entire world because of World War II.
I actually did not know this. I knew we
Yeah.
were pretty destroyed, but
We were destroyed, but the only city that was worse than Manila in terms of destruction was Warsaw, Poland.
oh my god, yikes! That's a big ass yikes right there.
Exactly.
Didn't we make
And
an analogy out of this? The way in Lego, remember the Lego?
oh yeah, like how'd it go? I
Okay,
forgot.
so basically, America and me and Spain. Basically, we have a Lego set. Spain had that Lego set, which is originally the Philippines, and then America took it away, and we were just like, give it back, and they're like, no, but why? So we tried to take it back, but they like stomp us on the ground. They're like, no, mine now, and they build it up, and they're going to give it to us. And then Japan comes in with the fucking samurai sword,
And then
slashes
they
it in
wreck it.
half. Yeah, and
Yes.
they wreck. And then and then
Yeah.
America just like gives it to us and just like, well, it's broken. Yeah, I know. Good luck. It just leaves. All
Yeah.
right.
Now, uh, the reason why they left after 1945 was mostly because they had the U.S. decided that the more important countries to actually focus on are Japan and Western Europe, like beefing them up against the communists. Since the Soviet Union came out really, really strong geopolitically after World War II, they were able to subjugate Eastern Europe. They were able to influence the Chinese communists to actually win the Civil War. So Japan, South Korea, Western Europe, very important not to fall to communism. So they rebuilt these regions from the ground up. And the Philippines was more of a secondary sideshow at that point. We really just lost our relevance because, like, there's Japan now. Japan is
Um,
directly under America's fold. So considering that they have the superior geographic location, superior industry, and arguably oh my god, this has come out as racist no matter what. um,
it's okay. It's okay.
I mean, a more compliant
Reasonable.
society.
Oh, okay. That's
uh,
not kind of racist. That's not racist. Maybe we're no
yeah,
want
like
more independence.
the Americans ended up deciding that investing in Japan is better for obvious reasons, and it really did work out. I mean, look, Japan's like the fifth largest economy today.
I mean, true. True. I think, and it was just to add, they're a lot more compliable people. I mean, they saw the sun 3 times. You know,
Well,
I'm
yeah,
just
they did. They did.
yeah, they
This,
did.
this is what happens when you nuke someone.
Yeah, you nuke someone, and then now they make hentai. Easy. All right, let's go.
Yes.
Yes.
Anyway, so back to what I was saying. In the Philippines, during the war, the Americans did do a methodical sweep of the country, trying to wipe out the Japanese, right? Trying to kick them out.
Mm-hmm.
The Americans actually ended up destroying the entire Japanese navy in the Battle of Leyte.
Oh yeah, yeah. I read about that.
Like only a few ships were able to escape, and they clapped the entire battleship fleet and whatever was left of the aircraft carriers at Leyte.
Damn, that's nice, easy.
And did you know about this Japanese soldier that actually hid in the jungles of Mindoro, I think?
Oh yeah,
And he
yeah.
fought until 1972.
God, damn,
What a legend.
what a legend! Just like he still has that freaking what's that called? I mean, type. God, I don't know why all Japanese weapons has type on it.
Well,
But
I don't know. I mean, he was using an Arisaka with a bayonet, and he just looted ammunition from like the local police and stuff like that. And yeah, it really did take his commanding officer, who somehow survived the war, to come back to the Philippines and tell him he's relieved of duty before he stopped. Not even the Japanese prime minister, not even President Marcos at the time, could make him stop.
wow, damn! Just imagine the ideology behind that mindset. No, you're lying to me, man. I know this.
It's Bushido.
It's Bushido, yeah. All right.
But anyway, so where were we? Right, the
Uh,
Americans and the Reconstruction, right?
yep.
So other than that, the Philippines were really independence by this point. Like, even during the war, Manuel Quezon demanded that the Philippines be given independence so that they could declare neutrality from the war and Japan would just go away. War doesn't work that way, Manuel. It really doesn't work that way.
True.
The Japanese would invade us anyway. So, yeah. The reason why Japan would invade us anyway is because the Philippines is such a strategic location in Southeast Asia. Like, you can imagine the distance between Japan and Indonesia. Indonesia was always the main goal of the Japanese, and the Philippines just happened to be conveniently right in the middle of Japan and Indonesia. So the Philippines had to be taken in order to establish a stable supply route.
Damn.
And
Rip.
well, after that, Reconstruction and all that, the Americans did help-ish in reconstructing the Philippines. They did for a year. They left in July 4, 1946. So they gave us independence around the same time as their 200th, no, whatever. One of those anniversaries. I forgot. But basically, they basically gave us the symbolic date of independence as well for the sake of appeasing the American public, because we're giving freedom the same day that Americans got freedom.
Hey, nice
And
one.
for a time, it was recognized as our Independence Day, since that really was our Independence Day. June 12, 1898 may have been a declaration of independence, but it was not. True independence came in 1946. So generally, that was what it was accepted at the time.
Oh,
And yeah, in terms of like helping out the Philippines, though, the Americans mostly lent military military support to the Philippines when the Hukbalahap group ended up rebelling against the Philippine government. And basically, it was more of an anti-communist operation, what the Americans did here after, the war.
okay.
The reconstruction was mostly done by Filipinos, but the Americans gave us some very generous stimulus to go with it, which is why the Philippines actually ascended to be the second biggest economy in all of Asia, just behind Japan.
Ooh,
in the
let's go. Let's go.
And then we obviously screwed that up, and now we're here.
But how did we screw that up?
The Marcos regime, but we'll get to that later.
Okay. So
So,
I guess
what's next?
yeah, so I guess the third question is, do you think there's a problem with how Westerners are perceived here? Seems like lately, these days, that most people are...
Yeah, I get what you mean. And yes, there is a problem with how people see Westerners here. Here in the Philippines, forgive me, but there's an almost racist connotation when we talk about white people.
True.
True. There are one of two ways that a Filipino would perceive an American. If you are politically left, you'd see them as an oppressor. And two, if you're politically right, you would see them as these inherently rich people who are societally superior and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, So at the end of the day, like here in the Philippines, Americans are both adored and hated, which is why it's a love-hate relationship. Like, people adore the United States for all of its economic opportunity and what it gives us Filipinos. But at the same time, a lot of Filipinos hate the United States for a lot of perceived problems that are actually, constructed by Marxists. Like, leftists would, for example, put the blame on America for a lot of things that went wrong here in the Philippines. And while some of them do have merit, others are just rhetorical and actually debunkable. And actually, I should shut up on that part. We're getting into this.
Oh, okay. Okay, could you give us at least one example para sa ano na yan? Sa what can you debunk? That's
give me something here.
Ano pwede mo may debunk na? Do you think it's still American imperialism? Like,
why right. Yeah, third world imperialism. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can debunk that. The The thing with the whole reasoning behind this notion that America still controls the Philippines through economics and stuff like that, it's false. Because the United States has had no interference in the Philippine economy as an entity itself. Like, we voluntarily go to the United States to work for them voluntarily and to send money back here voluntarily. There is nothing oppressive about it because everything is actually consented and voluntary. We agreed to this. There is no oppression going on in that sense. Like, OFWs primarily choose the United States because of its high wages and stuff like that. And it's really just the unfortunate circumstance that the Philippines is a poor country that we decide to go to the United States and other nations around the world to work and then bring back so much money that we actually make up a substantial portion of the Philippine economy when we send back money. So it's not exactly because we're bound to the United States. No. It's more due to the reality that so many of our citizens live there. More than 1 million Filipinos have integrated into the United States, either as an OFW or as a citizen. And with that said, kind of obvious. There's a lot of political ties that bind us together because of it, as well as our shared history and stuff like that. It might seem that the Philippines is simping for the U.S., but really, that's not the case. Not anymore, at least.
It's equally beneficial, diba? Like,
it is. It really is. Because the American economy, at the end of the day, is our biggest shield from economic disparity. We don't have any industry to speak of here, which is why we relied on the U.S. for so long to bring us our stuff. Even in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, it was the U.S. that was our main import partner. And then the Chinese came. And then Duterte came.
And we'll not talk about it today.
Not today.
Not today, baby. All right. Oh nga pala, is it true that we import a lot of the nurses? Like all of the nurses we import, we export nurses.
Well, yeah, it is true. Like the most stereotypical way a Filipino is portrayed abroad is that they're either a caretaker or a nurse. It's always one of those two. And it's not just in the United States. It's also in Canada, most of Europe, most of the Middle East, Hong Kong, Japan, South Korea.
Okay, you're back. You're good.
And yeah, basically the stereotype does exist and is self-feeding because so many Filipinos still want to be nurses, even though the market's already been oversaturated.
Dude, I'm actually thinking I want to be a nurse, but
really?
Yeah, I actually want to be a nurse.
Let me guess. You want to go to UST to be a nurse?
UST? Nah. See, I'm going to LaSalle.
You know, there is a popular saying in the Philippines that when all else fails, go for nursing.
It works, though. It works.
It does work. I mean, nurses are particularly well off. Well, not in those countries, at least, in terms of like richness and stuff. But they send back a lot of cash. Yeah, so there's that.
It does.
So other than the third world imperialism thingy, our economic dependence on the world is primarily due to the fact that the Philippines has not industrialized. So that's on us. We chose to go straight for service economy in an economy that is too premature to actually consider service as the main way of handling things. Europe, America, the British Commonwealth, they can handle service because they've already matured their economies past industrialization. The Philippines cannot because we never had industrialization. We mostly stuck with agriculture even through the age of the Americans. So that's the thing. And other than that, let's see. The thing is that people generally see it as an oppressive sort of thing because foreign companies are coming here taking our resources, so they say, right? But the thing is, these things were hashed out in deals with the consent of the government, with the consent of companies. Everyone who was actually a relevant party to what goes on in the business was asked about it, and they all agreed, which is why we have miners from the US, from China, from just about anywhere taking stuff. Because we don't even have the industrial base to even process these things. They do it for us.
True.
And we just get it back at like cheaper prices or something.
Would you say we didn't industrialize enough?
Exactly. Like the only part of the Philippines that actually has remotely any good amount of industrialization is Region 4, which is the area south of Manila. That's it. Anywhere north or south of that, anywhere north or south of that, there is no industry at all to speak of. Like, for example, in your area, Cagayan, do you see any factories nearby?
No.
Exactly. Like even here from where I am in Central Luzon, I don't see factories for miles and miles and miles. The nearest ones are always close to Manila. That's how bad it is.
Yeah, there's a lot of land that can be developed further.
Yeah, but obviously that's going to clash with like the people that say protect farmers' rights and stuff like that, because of course they're going to have to requisition farmers' lands to build these sort of stuff, and it's already unpopular that we're building new highways on farmers' land. So what are the odds that taking the land for factories, which generally is seen as a bad thing here in the Philippines because pollution, would be a good thing?
True. Okay.
And anyway, next.
Okay. Next question. We went off on a tangent there, though.
Yeah, we did.
Okay. So, fifth question is, this might sound controversial, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. Why didn't America intervene during the Marcos and dictatorial regime? Seems like they could have done something.
Oh boy. Cold War policy. Let's go. This is not a defense of what the U.S. did. It's obviously wrong that they allowed a dictator to take over a democratic nation. Sure. But they were being practical here. The war was against communism, right? The Cold War was against communism. And in the 1960s, things were heating up a lot. Like, remember Vietnam? That was happening.
I can remember. Yeah. Vietnam's one.
And the thing is, the Americans were already using the Philippines as a base to like station troops so that there's a short jump to Vietnam. Like we're the closest thing that they can get to like Vietnam. So we became a staging point for that shit. And well, during the course of the Vietnam War, the Philippines actually sent volunteers to help out in the war effort. A lot of them came back communists. One of them was Jose Marie Chan. Wait, no, Jose Marie Chan. My bad. Oh my god. Oh my god. Not the Christmas guy. I'm sorry.
The Christmas guy is just like, yo, what did I do?
No, he's not communist. He may wear red, but he's not communist. What I meant was Jose Marie Chan, the guy who founded the Communist Party of the Philippines, and basically things were devolving really quickly in the late 1960s here in the Philippines. Like in the later years of Marcos's first term, civil unrest was starting to become a thing. Like, for example, incidents such as the Plaza Miranda bombing, the Diliman Commune. These things were pushing a lot of communist fears into the Philippines. And the Communist Party of the Philippines is just seen as this massive continuation of the Hukbalahap movement. Ooh. And that obviously didn't sit well with anyone in the government. And around the same time, the Moros were starting to rebel in the South. So you got the MNLF and the CPP both suddenly starting to stir up insurgency in the Philippines. This is why martial law actually was declared, because of these incidents, as well as this one massive incident where a shipment of what's it called? A shipment of arms was found in the north, in Ilocos, that came from the Chinese communists. The government busted that shipment and confiscated the guns. And they used that as a massive reason as to why martial law should have been declared. And the Americans, seeing everything that's happening in the Philippines, decided to condone Marcos's actions because it seemed necessary at the time. Even though, at the end of the day, it's really a power grab by Marcos. Now, why the Americans didn't tell Marcos to step down after the Vietnam War ended was because One, they no longer controlled the country. They no longer wished to interfere in the politics of the Philippines. And two, they saw it as practical because Marcos is a staunch anti-communist. What was more important for the Americans was to contain the threat of communism from destroying more countries. But at the end of the day, that also meant enabling dictators to, set up shop. And that's where America went wrong, I think. Like, if they were going to liberate people from specific tyrannies, then the Philippines should have been one of those that they lobbied for Marcos to step down from. They could have used geopolitical clout to do that, especially in the 1970s. And, well, during the Marcos years, some people say it was really stable despite all of the crackdowns. And others say that towards the end of it, it was really bad. In the 1980s, that was on full display. Like, after Marcos rescinded martial law and returned a civilian government, that's when the Philippine economy started tailspinning to disastrous proportions. Like, back then, 5 pesos equaled $1 in 1980.
Ooh.
By 1985, it was 20 pesos for $1. Imagine how bad that was.
Damn.
And yeah, the Americans decided, no, it's not worth it to intervene in this. No. So at the end of the day, when communism was already falling apart, the Americans were like, we don't care what happens to this guy. So yeah. But as for the rest of the Philippines, they didn't really think about it too much at the time because the U.S. was busy doing things elsewhere. The Philippines were mostly concerned about liberating themselves. They didn't really ask for help from the Americans to, oust Marcos.
Okay.
And, well, now the question would be, why did America evacuate Marcos to Hawaii? Why did they protect him?
Yeah, what's up with that?
It's mostly a strategic decision made by Ronald Reagan. As a head of state, Marcos actually had some privileges. So he set up a deal with the U.S. government to stay out of Philippine politics forever by moving to Hawaii. As long as he's guaranteed his safety, he will not touch the Philippines. And that he did. He stayed there for 3 years until he died in 1989 due to lupus.
Damn. All right.
And then his children came back here. And then Imelda came here.
Did she? I don't know. Did she? Did she try to do a coup? There was an attempt to do a coup against the other female president.
The Aquino administration?
Yeah.
Yeah, there were like 6.
6? I thought there was only one. For some reason, I only thought there was one.
The worst one was in the 1990s, I think, because Manila legitimately turned into a battleground in the 1990s. I think it was 1991. Let me check.
Ooh. Let's see. 1991. Damn.
90. My bad.
Okay.
So, in No, wait, 1989 there. December 1, 1989. Yeah, it was bad because the Philippine military still had a lot of Marcos loyalists because, of course, Marcos really liked the military. He funded it a lot, gave it all the resources it needed. So what ended up happening here was that basically there was a wing in the military that decided to forcefully take over the government, yeah. And they did this by actually dive bombing Malacanang Palace with like with World War II.
Oh, okay. We back to World War II guns. All right. Okay.
It was pretty pathetic that we were still using freaking props in 1989 to do military stuff.
Yeah, come on, man. We ain't a rich country anymore.
Anyway, yeah. So the Philippines actually had to call in the U.S. Seventh Fleet to help out with this. We had to get like U.S. Marines in Manila to clear out buildings and stuff like that. They mostly defended the U.S. Embassy, but then there was a battle around Makati, and it was house to house. And they shot down the planes trying to dive bomb Malacanang with like modern F-4 fighters and stuff like that.
Damn, dive bomb.
They got the World War II planes got top gunned.
Who knew? No propeller freaking things just got obliterated by jets. Okay.
Of course. George H.W. Bush actually did give special permission for the U.S. military to intervene against the plotters of the coup in the Philippines. And, well, I do think that leads us to like a good way to wrap it up, like what the relationship is today, right?
Yeah. That was my last question. So you.
Oh, what a coincidence! So, the relationship today is a bit complicated. See, like until Duterte came, the Philippines was actually the most pro-American nation on earth, with 94% of the population saying they trust the United States. This was true because there's a lot of financial aid that the Americans gave us during the 1990s in order to rebuild from the Marcos administration. It was actually President Aquino who was able to negotiate with America, the Congress of the United States, to give us relief aid for reestablishing democracy in Southeast Asia. Since at the end of the day, it's only the Philippines and South Korea that have fully reinstated democracy by then. Taiwan was still a bit of a dictatorship. And the rest of the countries here are not exactly democracies, now are they?
Yeah, they are. Rip.
So, given that, the United States was also the main defender of the Philippines in terms of military stuff. We didn't really need the military until recently, since China. Because in the 2010s, China started doing the whole South China Sea thing. So that's when the U.S. military suddenly became like super important to us. And then Duterte came along with his populist rhetoric saying that America is full of oppressing bastards and stuff like that. And I mean, you remember that time he called Obama son of a bitch?
Yeah. I do remember that. I do remember this. Obama said Duterte seems to be a colorful guy. You said that, right?
he did say that. And in terms of trade, the Philippines still does heavily rely on the U.S. I mean, American goods are seen as superior here in the Philippines compared to obviously those made in China. And in terms of jobs, the Philippine economy is really integrated with the American economy because of our literacy with English. The second most popular job for Filipinos is call center agents. So American companies would hire them for cheap and they would do the work. So there's a lot of economic interconnectivity there. And then there's also, in terms of public perception here in the Philippines, the U.S. itself, like the landmass that is the United States, the geography, all that, and the people are seen as good things. It's just that the United States government is not a good thing. Even though, ironically enough, we did base like almost everything on the U.S. Constitution.
Yeah, we just look at the Constitution, just like, hey, copy that,
because it works. It actually works. Like America has been the second most stable regime in the world, so it makes sense, doesn't it?
True. I mean, if it works, right?
Yeah, and after that, the perception of the Americans and the Filipinos, on the other hand, it's pretty mixed. Some racists would say that the Filipinos are inferior, stuff like that. The usual talking points.
The usual.
Yeah. And other than that, people generally see Filipinos as hardworking. It's just that they don't really advance much in society because, if the job pays good, they don't really leave.
Yeah.
I've seen people stick to the same profession for like 30 years now. They just don't move up the economic ladder because they refuse to risk it.
Because like why trade why trade what
Why
could potentially be
why risk
tax.
why risk this much money for more money when you don't know if it'll work out? Stuff like that.
True.
That's the thing with Filipinos. There's a lack of economic dynamism here. We're too afraid to take risks like that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And other than that, Americans also see the Philippines as a good vacation spot. Definitely.
Nice.
I
That's nice.
mean,
That's nice.
a lot of American men actually like Filipino women.
That's true, but it's always like a thing in pag may if American comes here, there's always a swimming pool. There's always swimming. There's always that thing happening here.
Yeah,
I don't
there's
know
that
why.
thing happening here. Um, Mostly because Filipino women actually do sign up for this thing, like online prostitution for. Yeah, they're called escort girls. There's a lot of them there in Manila, and it's a booming industry, I gotta say.
Well, you gotta do what you gotta do. Am I
I
right?
mean, yeah, I mean, power to the women, I guess, but uh,
I mean,
obviously, I'm not gonna judge.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess parang ano, it's a way in. I guess. Would you say
It is
that
a
it's a
way.
way in? It's a good way in.
I mean, other than that, like a lot of Filipinos still do want to move to the United States. I've actually conducted a research survey back in 10th grade
Mm-hmm.
on Filipinos and whether they want to go abroad and stay abroad, like Filipino students.
Mm-hmm.
And around 75% of them said that they want to move abroad, of which 62% said that they want to move to the United States.
Oh, okay, okay. Eto, here. One last question.
Yeah.
Oh, wait lang.
All right, man, just take your time.
Yes, hello?
Yeah.
All right. Um, okay. Ano yung last question? All right, here's my last question. Um, goddamn, wala tuloy. My mom distracted me. But it's okay.
That's
Uh,
okay.
it's, man, nakalimutan ko na. Oh, it's fine. It's okay. You know what? Let's ask it no, later again. Let's nakalimutan na. I really forgot. Here. Do you think if you did that survey today, do you think people will be a lot more scared because there's a lot of things happening in the U.S. right now?
I'm sorry, what?
There's a lot of things happening in the U.S. right now, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that happened over the last year. What do you think? Do you think people are more scared in the Philippines to go to America, or do the Philippines still want to go to America? Most of it.
Oh, I think I get it.
Yeah, yeah.
Based on experience, it's a mixed bag. Like if you ask 2020, I would say a lot of Filipinos are scared to go to the US. Rampant Black Lives Matter riots were happening,
Mhm.
and gun violence was on the rise.
Oof, oof. All right, all right. Okay, okay. Pre, nawala ka. Okay.
Anyone? Yeah,
Dude, you're
hear me?
nawawala ka. Yeah. Can you repeat what you
Oh,
said?
sorry. What's the last thing you heard?
BLM riots lang.
All right. So in November 2020, I would say that people are scared to go to America because there's a lot of gun violence, looting, destruction, COVID, all that stuff, really. But if you asked me that today, I would say that a lot of Filipinos would jump at the chance to go to America, like right now,
True, true. Because you know
because
why?
the vaccines are already free for everyone to get. You don't even have to be an American citizen to get a vaccine there, and you get the best vaccines in the world, really. As well as that,
Nice.
um, things have largely calmed down, and well, it's just politics as usual nowadays in America. There is no rioting as much as before. Uh, there's also the added benefit of having to get to live a normal life again, because Americans are going maskless at this point. Though that may change in the future again because of the Delta variant spreading also in the US, but that's a different story. But otherwise, things are looking normal again in America. It's almost a post-pandemic nation. It's almost there.
Okay. Well, that's my last question, bro. And
all right. So that said, it wraps up our segment of the day. I want to thank you for joining me, dude. And I want to thank the rest of you for hanging out with us on our little rambles. Stay tuned. The Point of Discourse will be back with the fresh episode soon enough. Until then, enjoy the summer and stay frosty, people.
Peace.